On BBC2 in 5 minutes, the late-night Clive James talks to one of the most credible contributors to Elvis mythology, who maintains the King is still alive. Here on 1 in 15 minutes, broadcaster Jack Killian receives another midnight caller. Now, the news and sport with Michael Buerk.
Two opinion polls show Labour's now as popular as the Tories. Neil Kinnock says only Labour can beat Mrs Thatcher, but Paddy Ashdown says if the centre united, they could win. And metal fatigue looks to have blown the hole in the jumbo jet. Good evening. Two opinion polls in tomorrow's newspapers say that for the first time since 1986, Labour are no longer trailing the Tories. The Harris poll in The Observer shows Labour 1 point ahead, 42% to the Conservatives' 41%. The Democrats and the SDP trail, their support unchanged. Gallup in the Sunday Telegraph shows Labour level with the Conservatives at 35% each, and the other two parties just as far behind. Labour tonight said the poll showed they were the only party capable of beating Mrs Thatcher. But the leader of the Democrats, Paddy Ashdown, said the Richmond by-election showed a united centre party could win the next election.
For Labour leaders, overhauling the Conservatives, albeit in just one opinion poll, will give a major psychological boost to their campaign to persuade voters that Labour alone can win the next election. Neil Kinnock argued tonight that the recent trend of opinion polls showed growing popular belief that Labour is the only party which can overcome the Tories. But as the SDP's second place in Richmond showed, in individual constituencies, voters are still turning to a variety of parties to express their current dissatisfaction with the government. It's this which has led Democrat MP David Alton and his SDP colleague John Cartwright to advocate electoral pacts involving the three main opposition groupings.
One of Paddy Ashdown's problems is that he still believes that one party can win outright. I think what the British electors are saying to the opposition parties is that we don't trust any of you enough to make you a government on your own. And the logic of that, it seems to me, is that all the opposition parties ought to be seeing how far we can work together to produce a common programme for government.
But Paddy Ashdown in Manchester today still refused to contemplate a pact with Dr. Owen, saying it would simply insult the intelligence of the electorate.
I don't doubt that a pact could win an occasional by-election here or there, but they do not seem to be practical in the face of a general election where you have to be putting forward an alternative government. And secondly, that pacts also seem to me to be thoroughly undemocratic in a way which I believe our party should not accept.
He's winning the firm backing of his party activists, and the clear indications are that Labour, the Democrats and the SDP will all fight Mrs Thatcher separately at the next election.
The Irish Prime Minister Charles Haughey has again called for talks with Northern Ireland's unionist politicians. Speaking at his party's annual conference in Dublin, Mr Haughey said nothing would be ruled out of any such talks, but he made it clear there was no prospect of scrapping the Anglo-Irish agreement.
Charles Haughey came to speak tonight to a party in which he's never been more popular or powerful. His government's a minority one, but severe spending cutbacks haven't hampered its appeal. Mr Haughey will resist the temptation, but if an election was called now, opinion polls indicate there'd be a landslide for his party. This conference is a celebration of 2 years in office, but Northern Ireland remains an unresolved problem, one which has its overspill into the Irish Republic. Tonight, Mr Haughey repeated his invitation to unionists from north of the border to talk direct to him.
If such a development could bring us even one step forward, one step away from violence, as I sincerely believe it would, then it is difficult to see how the unionist leadership can be morally justified in refusing the invitation which I now again warmly extend to them.
Mr Haughey and his party opposed the Anglo-Irish agreement. Now they want to strengthen it.
No one ever claimed that the agreement represented a lasting solution, but until such time as something better or more acceptable can be negotiated and agreed to take its place, the present agreement must stand.
So, while the Anglo-Irish agreement will stay, Mr Haughey is underlining, particularly to unionists who want to get rid of it, that it can be replaced. Mr Haughey's message, that it's up to the unionists to push that open door. Dennis Murray, BBC News, Dublin.
Investigators are looking for signs of metal fatigue on the jumbo jet which ripped open yesterday as it flew over the Pacific. 9 people are presumed dead after the accident. The possibility of a bomb causing the damage hasn't been ruled out, but there's been none of the evidence usually linked to an explosion.
The United Airlines Boeing 747 was 20,000 feet above the Pacific when the huge hole appeared in the fuselage. 9 people were sucked out and killed. The pilot managed to land in Honolulu and a thorough investigation began. Initially, sabotage was suspected, but so far all the evidence points to structural failure, possibly caused by metal fatigue. Investigators said the hole looked too clean for a bomb and there was no fragmentation damage. And by studying the pictures, British experts too have been able to reach tentative conclusions.
We have the line of locks which engage here at the bottom of the freight door. The freight door might well have swung open and through sheer momentum and the pressurization blast from the inside of the aircraft have swung up and taken that large strip of fuselage with it. Now, the thing which caused the bolts to fail could have been a small explosion. No evidence for it at the moment, but it could have been. We can't rule it out. Other possibility, metal fatigue, some form of failure of that type.
Last year, the US government ordered airlines to improve cargo door lock systems on older 747s after some problems were experienced. Meanwhile, a search is continuing for bodies of victims, but so far, only debris has been recovered.
Black mourners in South Africa chanted slogans supporting Nelson Mandela as Stompy Moeti was buried near Johannesburg today. He's the boy of 14 police say was murdered by 3 members of Winnie Mandela's bodyguard. Graffiti along the funeral route branded her as a killer.
A political funeral with a difference. Just this once, the South African government allowed protest in the street, allowed full news coverage normally banned under the emergency, and kept police out of sight. All because the murder of 14-year-old Stompy Moeti is blamed not on the state, but on the bodyguards of Winnie Mandela. Community feeling is running ahead of the courts. No one in Tumahole Township was outraged by the graffiti, whoever daubed it on hoardings along the funeral route. No one in the township has made any attempt to paint over the graffiti, to remove the accusation against Mrs. Mandela. And Stompy's grieving mother rejects claims by the Mandela bodyguards they did not kill him, but rescued him from sexual abuse by a Methodist minister. The Reverend Paul Verrain denies the allegations and was made welcome in church today.
I have lost a friend. I have lost a freedom fighter.
Others remember a remarkable child of South Africa. Aged 12, Stompy led a children's army in township revolt. He predicted his own death, but not the storm it would create. James Robbins, BBC News, Tumahole Township.
The Duke of Edinburgh, who attended the funeral of Emperor Hirohito yesterday, has visited the graves of British and Commonwealth servicemen who died in prisoner of war camps in Japan. Earlier, he met Japan's new emperor, Akihito.
The Duke of Edinburgh had 2 important morning appointments before he left Japan. First, a visit to the Imperial Palace, where he took his turn to meet the new Emperor Akihito and Empress Michiko. The Emperor is in official mourning for his father until the end of the year, when his enthronement will be the occasion for more elaborate ceremony. Then the Duke moved on to the Commonwealth War Cemetery at Yokohama outside Tokyo to walk between the graves of Commonwealth servicemen who died in the wars with Japan and North Korea. In the rain and bitter cold, the Duke laid a wreath at the foot of the memorial to 1,700 British, Hong Kong, Australian, New Zealand, Indian and Canadian servicemen who died in Japan.
Here, winter has finally arrived in many parts of the country. There have been heavy snowfalls in Scotland, Cornwall and Derbyshire. One of the worst-hit areas was around Buxton in Derbyshire. Dozens of roads were blocked and many motorists had to abandon their vehicles. But for some, it was an opportunity to enjoy what they thought they'd miss completely this year. And the forecasters say there could be more snow on the way, this time in the southeast. The day's sport was also hit by the weather, with 15 football matches called off. With the news of the sport that did go ahead, here's David Icke.
No weather problems for Arsenal. They're still 4 points clear at the top of the First Division after a 2-0 win over Luton at Highbury. Perry Groves and Alan Smith scored the goals in the second half. It was Smith's 20th of the season. The match of the day brought together Arsenal's nearest challengers, Norwich, and 5th place Manchester United at Carrow Road.
Unbeaten in 10 games, Manchester United look set to provide a stern test for Norwich's championship ambitions. Norwich, though, settled quickly, took control of the midfield and proceeded to delight a crowd of over 23,000 with the quality of their play. They got their reward when Culverhouse's free kick penetrated deep into the box. Rosario headed on and Butterworth got the vital touch. After earlier disappointments at Carrow Road, this was just the tonic they wanted, and there was more to come. Rosario winning an aerial battle with McGrath, a superb turn and shot by Putney, and Allen following up gave Norwich the cushion of a second goal. United manager Alex Ferguson wanted more from his side. Gordon Strachan responded with a 30-yard pass, allowing McClare to set up McGrath for an excellent finish. 2-1, but Norwich held on, leaving their captain called up for the England squad this week with this message for the cynics.
Well, keep writing us off. I mean, we're up there with points clear now of 3rd place, so we'll keep going right to the end.
Tony Cascarino's late goal gave Millwall an important 1-0 win over Coventry, and Paul Goddard got 2 as Derby beat Everton 3-2. So no change at the top of the table, but jockeying for position continues below Arsenal and Norwich. Millwall move up to 3rd and Derby make an appearance in the top 6. In Scotland, Ian Ferguson, Ali McCoist and Mark Walters were the Rangers scorers in a 3-1 win over St Mirren. That win has lifted Rangers 4 points clear at the top of the table ahead of Dundee United, whose match was postponed. Aberdeen beat Hearts 3-0 and Celtic won at Dundee by the same score. The match of the round in Rugby Union's Pilkington Cup quarter-finals was the West Country clash between two great rivals, Bath and Bristol. Heavy overnight rain made conditions farcical at times, but the players still managed to produce a thriller. England fullback Jonathan Webb scored all the Bristol points, including their only try. That put Bristol 9-0 up, but Bath replied within minutes, watched by a big home crowd. Swift into passing sent Jeremy Guscott paddling through for what was, in every sense, a Bath try. Seven minutes from time, they clinched it. Richard Hill, the scorer, and Bath were the winners by 14 points to 12. Florence Griffith-Joyner, the elegant star of the Seoul Olympics, is retiring from athletics. Flojo was as renowned for her spectacular track wear as her dynamic sprinting. She won 3 gold medals in Seoul, setting a world record here in the 200 metres. Her acting plans include playing a female James Bond. Well, in just a few hours' time, Frank Bruno will step into the ring at the Las Vegas Hilton to fight Mike Tyson for the heavyweight championship of the world. The experts say he has no chance, but he's backed by an army of supporters.
Everything is in place. Mike Tyson will leave this corner 6 hours from now. Frank Bruno's challenge is expected to be short and unsuccessful. However, he is in superb physical shape. Mentally, too, he seems ready for a challenge that is serious, not just about a big payday.
You don't leave your home to come away for 2 months to live in the desert in Arizona if you don't think you're going to win. But there's going to be a new heavyweight champion of the world.
Bruno would be Britain's first of the century. Opinion is divided on whether history is in the making.
I think Tyson's just going to get thumped. That simple.
I think Tyson's going to knock him out in the first round.
Second round, Bruno got a lucky punch in.
Tyson's going to beat him, but it's going to be a better fight than people think.
Over 350 security men will be on hand to control the crowd. That will contain at least 2,000 British fans who up to now have behaved impeccably. The fight will be screened in 38 countries around the world. Only the length and the quality of the British challenge remains to be seen. Rob Bonnet, BBC News, ringside in Las Vegas.
Tonight's main story again. A national opinion poll has put the Labour Party ahead of the Conservatives for the first time in 3 years. Another puts them level. And a look at some of tomorrow's front pages. The Mail on Sunday reports 2 children in the Cleveland abuse crisis who say in an open letter that their claims they weren't abused were ignored by all the authorities. From hiding, Salman Rushdie sends word to The Observer. He's written a book review and talks about his exile. And the Sunday Express says the Prime Minister is putting the boot in over a return to Europe for English soccer clubs until the identity card scheme is fully effective. That's it. Wrap up warm. From the newsroom, good night.
Potter, Michael, 16,000.
After Richmond, what next for the Democrats? Paddy Ashdown goes on the record. And as our capital grinds to a halt, what does the government intend to do, and can it be done? Paul Channon makes his case. Then sex and politics. What makes a scandal in the 1980s?
He is now said to have slept with 2 women other than his wife on Davey's inauguration. Well, that's rum.
And that's On the Record, tomorrow at 1 o'clock on BBC1.
A very good evening to you. I can confirm that the pressure over southern parts of Britain today is the lowest we've had for the last 120 years. But not true of Scotland, because they've had lower pressures than the 950. Now, so far we've been quite lucky with the winds, but they are beginning to get quite strong now, particularly through Shetland, some parts of the southwest where it's been gusting up to 92 miles an hour. So we'll have some very strong winds through the English Channel and some parts of the southeast. Now, this area of low pressure is going to be around for several days, so basically the weather is going to be, I think, fairly showery, with the strongest winds getting into much of western and southwestern parts of the British Isles. In the south, you can see on the radar rainfall here, we've got a lot of rain, and on its rear edge, it's tending to turn to sleet or snow. So as that rain works its way eastwards with that sleet and snow on its rear edge, I think mostly the snow is going to be over high ground, fairly wet snow, slushy stuff lower down. Now, we've had quite a bit of snow in Scotland today. That's drifting north, and we're going to have frequent wintry showers feeding into many northern and western coasts. 1 or 2 fog patches in central and northern England. A widespread frost tonight, so watch out for those icy patches. The strong winds in the south. Tomorrow, the sleety snow drifting out of East Anglia and some parts of Lincolnshire, and for most of us, a much brighter day tomorrow, but still in the cold side with those strong winds in the west. That's it from me.
From Las Vegas, BBC1 presents Bruno versus Tyson. Tonight, a special preview looks at the build-up to tomorrow's fight and Frank Bruno's chances of becoming heavyweight champion of the world.
I know that I've got to move and sharpen up, and I know I've got an animal coming in at me, but I'm very confident because I've been in with the animal before, Harry, and there's no ball.
Tyson versus Bruno, the whole fight, tomorrow here on BBC1.
Well, Jasper Carrott will be taking a swipe almost certainly below the belt, and anything that moves in the news when he confidentially traps it on the ropes in 50 minutes. First on 1, it's a case of midnight caller. You're just about all through.